Hey guys, Lotus Streams here, coming at you with another review. Today I'm gonna have a look at the Fracture of Biel-Tan from the Gathering Storm 2 book, and it is mostly about Eldar, Dark Eldar, and Harlequin. Now, what kind of content do we have here? We are gonna talk about the Ynnari, which is gonna be a new faction. We have 3 new characters. We have a bunch of formations, Warlord Traits, artifacts, the Revenant Discipline, a new psychic discipline, and 2 detachments, the Reborn Warhost Detachment and the Ulthwe Strike Force. Now, obviously, there is a lot of content, so if you already know stuff or you're not interested in stuff, I'm gonna put some timestamps in the description of the video, so just go down there and check that out if you want to, so we don't waste each other's time. All right. Um, Now, for everybody that does not play Eldar, I would highly recommend you watching the video because there's like a boatload of rules you need to know about these kind of detachments when you're trying to fight them, because they are very, very interactive, and things you do will affect you way more than things they do, which is really interesting and really fun. But if you don't know about it, you can make a lot of mistakes against that, which is obviously something you would not like to do. Right, but let's get to it. So first of all, the Ynnari are a combination of Eldar, Dark Eldar, and Harlequins into one faction. They still ally as battle brothers with all 3 of them, and the codices are all coexisting. This is by no means a replacement for anything like people argued with the Inquisition, but just like that, this is coexisting as normal. They basically add the faction of the Ynnari to the existing faction, which means all these guys can share in transports, which is obviously huge because one of the things you lost back then with the rule changes on the FAQ with the Battle Brothers losing the access is something like deep striking the guys in a allied transport. For example, if you're allying with Harlequin, or if you're allying with anything that can deep strike, Venoms, Raiders, all that stuff. So right there, that's a huge buff already if you include them in this kind of detachment. You lose Ancient Doom, so nothing against Slanesh, which doesn't matter. You lose Power from Pain, which hurts, but it's not that powerful most of the time. And you lose Battle Focus, which is a big deal, obviously, because it takes away from your mobility. But you will see that it's totally worth it because you gain a bunch of extra stuff against that, and that will weigh out the movement loss for sure. You also get access to additional artifacts in Revenant Discipline, which you can roll on in addition to whatever you have usually, and the artifacts also don't replace anything, but they will count towards the limit of artifacts you can take on one character, just like everything else. The unique rule they all have is the most powerful one yet I have seen. It's called Strength from Death, and it's pretty easy. On unit destruction, no matter if vehicle or anything else, doesn't matter. Within 7 inches, you can perform a soul burst action for that unit. A soul burst action is a move, shoot, run, turbo boost, or charge move, which can all happen in any phase. In your enemy's phase, in your own phase, doesn't matter. If you blow up a transport and annihilate one of your own units, basically, you still get it. Which is weird, but I mean, it's how it works. There is one little thing to this. If you charge and you reach another target, it's gonna continue at the initiative step you were fighting on. So basically, if you kill something at initiative 5 and then you move over and you don't have any initiative left, you cannot fight anymore. But other than that, obviously this is incredibly powerful. There is some restrictions, so you cannot mix that. You cannot use these here to attack something else. So rules are for once clear that you can't add some independent characters without the rule and then drag them across. Doesn't work. You cannot be locked in close combat and just escape. You cannot do it when you're falling back or you go into ground, and you can only do it once per turn. So we're not for Warhammer Fantasy yet with the overrunning, but something very similar. Um, Obviously, this is extremely powerful, and this is one of the most tricky stuff you can ever play because it occurs when your enemy starts killing you, which is obviously uh, really, really thinking intensive. Because if you deep strike those Wraithguard in there with the deflamers, they usually destroy a target, and then you start shooting stuff around them. Maybe they transport, they disembark, and they shoot something. And again, and again. Basically, you enable all of your units to make extra actions, which is obviously huge in any sense. And the combinations of those are the real big deal. I'll talk about that in another video because it is just too much for one review. Alright, so first character you have is Yvraine, something like that, 200 points, so very expensive. She has an 888 stat line, so Whimsical, which is 8, Initiative 8, but Strength 3, Toughness 3, so very Elder-like. She has 4 attacks, not bad. 10, Leadership 10, why not? And a 4+ in 1 save, good thing too, because she doesn't have any armor save to speak of. And she has Eternal Warrior, not EQ, Fleet, which is obviously great. Independent character, Mastery level 2 on Sanctic and Revenant, which is a new discipline, and Sanctic obviously a pretty good one. Also has the unique special rule as usual, and she also has Stubborn for some reason. Will come into play. Maybe if you lose too much, we'll see. She gains D3 personal warp charges each phase, so even for denying, which is quite interesting. And on Aeldari, more death within 7 inches of her, she regains a wound on a 4+. Now, mind you, model. So if you can keep her alive and keep making your lookouts her, so you can basically try to run her around as a soaking wound mini Celestine, and with Eternal Warrior that will actually work out even though you are on toughness 3, so might be useful. If a Psyker dies, you also gain +1 mastery level and additional power, so that is extremely useful. Considering you're looking for Sanctic, there's a lot of good powers in there, and one of them is +2 strength, which is obviously something Eldar always struggle with. +1 in 1 save, so 3+ in 1 save right there, and all kinds of stuff to enhance your movement with Gate to Infinity and all that stuff. So that can be really, really nasty, and it's very, very easy to ally in some Psykers. That is no big deal. But they gotta die, otherwise it doesn't work. Her sword gives her +1 strength, AP3, instant death, so very solid. Good thing to go through marine equivalents, and not as bad against independent characters as you would think, because if they fail 1 wound, no fear, no pain, and they're out. If they don't have Eternal Warrior, that's always dangerous. And obviously, she can be taken as a HQ for all factions, Elder, Dark Elder, and Harlequins equals Combined Arms Detachment for Harlequins. And that is awesome, because that was something they could never do, run a bunch of troops into close combat. Now it works. So excellent there. The one thing if you know any of my reviews, you will already know what I'm trying to say here. No assault grenades. They never get freaking assault grenades. So all of your high initiative is down the drain as soon as you touch any terrain or your unit. And there you go. So don't charge through terrain. And players against Eldar, if you want to save yourself against this kind of stuff, be in terrain, and she's screwed. Nothing she can do about it. Even if somebody else has assault grenades, everybody has to have it, or they get dropped to their initiative 1. She has a Warlord trait that is set. That's a 14 range on Soul Burst instead of 7, which is actually really, really good. It is pretty unique, but it is a normal Warlord trait that you can get if you roll on it, so you have the possibility to get it without her. And I'm not sure if she can do enough damage to warrant his 200 points. I mean, in comparison to Belisario's Call, where I say, okay, that's 200 points right there, I take that any day. This one, not so much. She has some good synergy with a bunch of lists that I would like to play, but she is a very specific tool, not a all-rounder basically. And you have to basically make sure that she can use her on Aeldari mortal death power, and then she can mow down some minor squads pretty easily and not get stuck on something like monstrous creatures, for example, because together with Hammerhand she can make a very decent monstrous creature killer. Like instant death on each wound, AP3 is most of the times enough until you meet that Riptide. But even that guy has to care, because he might roll that one, and then he's down and he's stomping on her models next to her, and those will regain her wounds eventually. So not bad, and can be made to work, but stay away from terrain. Then the Visarch, or Visarch, I don't know, 150 points, so cheaper. 777, so strength as low as all the Eldar. Toughness is low, but weapon skill, initiative, all that is high. No assault grenades. Initiative doesn't matter. 4 attacks is not bad. Leadership 10, all fine. 3+ save. No invuln save here. That's a straight up 3+ save, nothing else. He also has Eternal Warrior Fleet independent character, but he also has precision strikes, which is nice. Gotta take out those nasty initiative 1 weapons that might kill him, because he doesn't have an invuln save, so he can hit that power fist into the face. He also has a rampage, also pretty good one, because increasing something that has a good weapons profile, and he has it, gives him more attacks, awesome. Also strength from death, so can do some pretty nasty assaulting, and he is stubborn as also. He has the same ability with the 4+ regaining, except he also gains +1 attack every time a character dies, up to 7. So he can be made into a pretty hardcore killing machine if he stays around long enough. Not necessarily something you would look out for, but if you go with many min squads, which is obviously something you would do in this detachment due to their rule, that can add up rather quickly. He has the same as the Inquisitorial Detachment guys. He has a Warlord trait that counts him as the Warlord for all purposes, but is in addition to any other Warlord traits. Awesome. He has an auto lookout, so if Yvraine takes any wounds, she can give it right to him. And that's not a must, that's a can. So he's pretty nice. And he also automatically makes the Glorious Intervention too. So you can combine those two as a little wound allocation tool together with some other close combat units. His sword gives him +2 strength, so AP5, AP2, two-handed, and silence on that one. People would argue, nah, not so much, but for me, that is one of the best abilities you can have in the game. Units within 3 inches lose the lowest leadership rather than the highest, and that's an AoE. So if you can get him somewhere, and you have access to Psychic Shriek or some other shenanigans, the Dark Eldar have a lot of shenanigans that will cause wounds based on leadership, and then there's this little mask that the Spirit Seer has, or the Shadow Seer, or whatever you want to. You can reduce leadership very, very easily, and now they're gonna use their lowest. So if there's some kind of Death Star going on and they have the leadership 10 in there with Azrael, there is also gonna be a leadership 7 guy in there, or there's gonna be a leadership 4 guy in there in terms of wolves. And now these guys are taking these tests with 4 -2 on leadership 2, and now these powers begin to hurt. Like all abilities begin to hurt, all the fear tests. Everything that is not fearless, and even those who are fearless, will not like that power. That does work in an AoE. So if you can get him somewhere, and that's his job to be somewhere, due to the extra actions, this is actually really, really nasty. Now talking about enough about all the cheese that I love, and I will use them for this kind of cheese, because this is exactly what I was waiting for. He is obviously pretty expensive himself. His combat profile is better though. He can deal with more, less with monster creatures, more with everything else. And the lack of his invuln save makes him is probably his only downside, really, apart from having no assault grenades that holds him back. But the amount of attacks you can rack up on him makes him really, really dangerous. He's basically an incubi on steroids. That's how would I describe him best. Um, Pretty solid, I'd say, all around, and very, very, very powerful in unique niche detachments. And then the Yncarne. Yncarne? I don't know, 275 points, so Lord of War class. Although weapon skill 9, pretty good. Ballistic skill 7, pretty good. It is a Psyker, so high ballistic skill equals good. Since you need sometimes to hit with something with which fire powers and all that stuff. Otherwise, a mixed profile, strength 6, so monstrous creature style, also toughness 6. I mean, initiative 10 with no assault grenades doesn't really do much for you. And 6 attacks, obviously, pretty nasty amount. 3+ save, meh, good, but not too good. Leadership 10 is always nice. Monstrous creature, lovely, gives you smash, gives you move through cover. It is also a character. It's a he, she, it, by the way. I'll refer as it to it because it's a reincarnation of all dead Eldar. It is a demon, so 5+ in 1 save and fear. Has deep strike, eternal warrior, fleet. So at the moment we're talking about a keeper of secrets pretty much. Very, very similar profile to it and exactly the same problems it also has. It's a much more expensive version, so let's see what we also get. First of all, it's Psychical Master level 3, so it's already worth a lot of points. And it also has the special rule that allows him to fight multiple times or run somewhere, move. He has more mobility than a keeper already. Now the interesting part is the Aeldari model. Death within 7 inches regains a wound on a 3+, so it's more effective than the other ones. And you must be deep striking, but you can deploy upon any model's death except when they are fleeing off the board, and deploy as close as you can, but not within 1 inch of whatever has died. And now, mind you, this is model. This is not non-vehicle model, anything like that. If you kill that rhino, the can is coming in from reserves turn 1, and there it is. It can also come in your enemy's turn, and if it does so, it can also charge, because it came in from Deep Strike the last turn and not the same turn, and so it can charge the next turn. Unless it's coming in your turn. In that case, it arrived from Deep Strike reserve and may not charge. So that is a precision summoning, so to call, and obviously a very, very mean one, because the Yncarne is incredibly powerful in terms of what it can do, in addition to being a Psyker. And that is not all. We are still not going. Within 12 inches, all the Ynnari have 12-inch Fearless and Feel No Pain. That's awesome, because the Yncarne and all the other characters are not fearless. So they're still prone to fear tests, pinning tests, on all that nasty stuff. This one is not, because it's obviously including itself with the fearless, and also makes the guys around fearless, and Feel No Pain is obviously really nice to have against small arms fire, like strength 5 shooting from Tau, that will bleed your wounds faster than anything else, but obviously doesn't have much against strength 6 upwards, because most of you guys are toughness 3. But as soon as they're sitting on a jet bike, that can change rather quickly, and you can bring the Yncarne with the 12-inch bubble wherever you want to, pretty much, so you can make sure it is at the right place at the right time with the right ability. And now we're always done talking with all the advantages, and haven't even mentioned the best one yet. It's only strength 6, and you would argue, has some problems with a bunch of units in this case, but doesn't matter, has war gear. AP2 already has it because of its monstrous creature, so it doesn't matter. But Fleshbane, Armorbane, Soul Blaze. Soul Blaze, not so relevant. Armorbane, very relevant, because obviously that's a bunch more to your dice roll, so you're averaging at 13 penetration. That means you can touch everything up to Land Raider or Titan class. And Fleshbane means you are wounding even toughness 8, toughness 9 stuff on 2s. Now mind you, no instant death, so not quite Scarbrand level yet, but very, very close in terms of killing power, and obviously way more survivable because it can regenerate those wounds no problem. Now it only has 5 of those, so you have to make sure that that works. 5 plus inward save, not so huge, but can be increased to 4 plus at least, and it is a demon. So it can go for some nice cheese there with Cursed Earth and all that funny stuff. Grammar of no true names. I have no idea why they do that. The demon rule is really, really abusable sometimes. But it doesn't matter. The Yncarne is, I think, worth every point. It's probably not even overcosted, even though it costs a shitload of points. You still have to think about the synergy effects that he can bring. And talking about synergistic effects, we have the first formation, the Triumvirate, just as the other one in the latest book. We also gain something special. So as soon as two models are nearby, basically all within 12 gain Fearless. Obviously awesome. All Eldar types have a problem with leadership. No, they don't. The entire army gets Fearless if all 3 models are on the battlefield with no restriction on the range. So as soon as something dies and the other 2 are probably in one squad, your monster awakes and comes into the battlefield to reap some souls. Everybody gets Fearless. Awesome. So you're losing models, no issue. Right now nobody's fleeing. And then, in addition to this, all get +1 to their respective bonuses if all 3 models are on the battlefield. Now mind you, that is regaining wounds, that's gaining attacks, and that's regaining wounds on 2+ upon each model's death. So as long as that thing keeps swinging and it is still in combat, invisibility for example, and it barely takes wounds, it can regain wounds incredibly fast. Like way, way better than anything else, and it doesn't even have to kill. You guys have to die for it to survive. So that can be very powerful, and the Triumvirate is obviously like so much points, not even funny, but it can be very effective. I think the rules are way better than the other Triumvirate. This is basically the Eldar version, everything is better, but you have to make sure that you make use of these guys, otherwise they will be waste of points, because they're not very specifically designed to do something very well other than close combat fighting, and that is a little bit tricky at times to get to. But if you gain a good amount of cheese and maybe a good amount of mobility from transports, you can make this work. Then we have the Soulbound Vanguard. We need 2 units of Dire Avengers, 1 unit of Incubi, and 1 unit of Witches. They gain +1 weapon skill and ballistic skill when they're joined by Visarch or Yvraine. And that is good, I guess. I mean, Dire Avengers already gained that from their formation. Incubi, not so much. They don't have any shooting, and witches are utterly useless, no matter what. The best use of those is dying, so one of your units can get a soul burst, pretty much. The guys get also furious charge when they're within 7 inches of each other. That one is awesome. Incubi have one single problem, maybe 2 assault grenades, and the second one, their strength is not high enough. Their weapons are AP2 at a very high initiative if you're not going through the terrain, so Furious Charge is going to help you out, and Power from Pain would only give you that on a very, very late turn. So that's a good one to have, and is not really hard to do. I mean, within 7 inches of a unit of witches is doable. And then one very interesting one, the sword burst range is increased to 14. So it's very, very easy for these guys to gain some extra movement, or gain some extra shooting, which is pretty nice for Dire Avengers, obviously, because their shooting is very solid, and sometimes they're not even in range. And with the loss of battle focus, you have to assume that they need to get some power back to make this work, and this is how you do it. So burst is made better here. And you will realize in these formations, Soul Burst will get a lot of mention. It will also get a lot of mention in Warlord Traits and so on. So the basic rule is very, very powerful, but can be made even more so powerful in the formations. So keep an eye on this. It's a very good trend. Would I use this? Incubi need transports, witches need transports. Dire Avengers need some kind of transport, otherwise they're dying too quickly. And they are all not necessarily units I would ever take. Dire Avengers are not so bad. Incubi are usable. They are basically a walking distraction carnifex at best, because they die fast enough if you focus fire them, and they're very, very dangerous if they are left alone, so people will try to kill them. And witches is basically like something like a walking kill point with no use whatsoever, but you never know. The Soul Burst range does actually matter, and we'll see if the detachments can do anything about the other downsides they have. Alright, next is the Aeldari Blade Host. 2 units of witches, useless. 2 units of Storm Guardians, useless. And you can also choose Black Guardians, which I'll talk about later, and 2 units of Troupes. So the Harlequin basic unit. As soon as you have 2 units in close combat, you gain Hatred, and if you have 3 units in the same combat, Preferred Enemy. So basically, you gain bonuses for ganging up on targets. Not so useful for Troupes and so on, because they most likely will take out whatever you charge, but even then they gain better abilities against monsters, creatures, and vehicles, which they suck against, which is obviously nice. And the YOLO Guardians, as I like to call them, because they're dying on sight, and they're made for close combat, but they're not good at close combat, obviously need some sort of thing to make them even halfway decent, and I don't know. Maybe good. But there is one thing. They have a 1 per turn ability, not per game, per turn. All units here gain the Soul Burst action instead of 1. And that does not have any range. Alright, so if something dies within 7 inches of any of these units, they immediately gain the ability to make a shooting attack, run, move, turbo boost, whatever you want to. Now, Troupes are very, very nasty in close combat. They also have hit and run, so these will jump into close combat, kill something, then everything else also gets to do the same action. Now, obviously, you can choose that. You don't have to do it, and if you do it, everything has to do the same. So you have to be a little bit careful with how good this is. Storm Guardians are not really good at shooting, which is don't shoot much, so we're mostly talking about close combat here, but we're also talking about extra charges, and also this on a unit that has hit and run will make sure you can use it most of the times pretty efficiently. So this one is one of these things that can be accelerated very fast, because there's many abilities that will enhance your Soul Burst, and you will come back to this formation. Remember, oh yeah, that is now very, very useful, because you increase the power times 6, basically, because you have 6 units that can profit from that. Ynnead's Net. One Warlock Skyrunner Conclave, I called them like that. They're not called like this, but they all have to take a bike. That's what Skyrunner means. There's at least 2 Warlocks, by the way, and they're basically only riding around and getting some psychic abilities. That's all. 1 unit of Wind Riders, standard bikes. 1 unit of Reavers, the Dark Eldar Jetbike close combat beasts, and 1 unit of Sky Weavers, Harlequin jet bikes with really good combat abilities. Very expensive unit, and can be made a very good Death Star unit at times. On every unit distraction, you generate one warp charge. I mean, why not? Some more dice to use for the Warlord Conclave. I mean, it's a good one, but not game-breaking. Then another one that's interesting, actually. I'm not saying very good, but very interesting. All of these guys have to stay in reserve, and they come all in on one roll, which is rerollable, so really good, because otherwise that would make this formation very risky. But remember, you are an Elder army, you have an autarch, +1 to the reserves, 2+ rerolling reserve roll, pretty sure they come in. And what is the special thing? They have to come in from all 4 board edges. I'm not saying this like they have the option, they have to choose one board edge each. So basically, you can come in from the enemy's board edge, and you have to come in from the enemy's board edge, which is not so much an issue because the Windwires have long range. They can come in from your board edge, and the Reavers, the Sky Weavers, can both come in from the enemy's edge because they're close combat types, and the Sky Weavers also have some cannons on their bikes, so they can pretty much show up in rear armor and dagger that down, even though they cannot charge because they come from reserves. And you can also attach units to that, obviously. The Warlock Skyrunner Conclave, not so much. And it's actually the one I do not like, because I can use all of the other units pretty well. Warlock Skyrunner Conclave, not so much. Very expensive, and the rule requires you to that you have to do that. And until they all come out of reserve and they charged something or did something useful, the other rule will not come into effect, right? Because you have to kill something. So that is meh, can be good, but I think there's better options, and there will be better options because this is an Aeldari review after all. The Whispering Ghost Hall. In other words, Games Workshop at Making Fear Great Again campaign, which never works. In every Raptor formation, in every Chaos Whisper formation, there's one of these formations that says -2 on fear checks, and also they gain fear. And this one is this formation. Absolutely useless most of the time, because most of these things have a mob rule table, or I don't know. Everybody has something to prevent guys from running away at some point, and fear does not work that well, and -2 leadership on fear test is not that huge. And what do you pay for that? I mean, you have to invest something. Once Farseer, awesome. Shadow Seer, awesome. Can always use that. Spirit Seer, not so awesome. 2 Wraith Lords, also not so awesome unless you really like Wraiths. And 3 units of Wraith Guard or Wraith Blades. So very, very, very expensive units. Good, yes, because you have some help now from the Dark Elder, and you have some nice Dark Elder transports, even better. But apart from that, not really something you would usually run. And what else do they gain? They reroll once when they're within 12 inches of a unit. If they are in range of a unit that is within 12 inches of a character from this formation. This does not apply to the Farseer or any characters, just to the Wraith constructs and so on. So, I don't know, a worse version of the Wraith Host pretty much, which is, by the way, also available in your detachment. So, it's pretty much outshined by most of the stuff in this book, and is also, I don't know, pretty redundant, I'd say. The fear stuff is not really good. The reroll ones would be awesome on a Farseer with psychic powers and all that stuff, but for Wraith Thoughts and so on, not so much. I don't know. The idea is pretty okay, but I wouldn't run this formation. It's too expensive to make it work easily. Alright, that's the formation so far. And we switch to Warlord Traits. I have only a selection here, obviously, because there's a bunch of bad Warlord Traits. But One of the Warlord traits is that Psyker can choose their powers, and it doesn't say about Revenant or anything. You can choose all disciplines powers, right? So that is good. That is really, really, really good, because Eldar have quite some good, quite some goodies, and even quite some bad powers. If you can choose those, that's awesome. You can mix and match all the powers you like, and then you have them. The next one is each turn you can choose to have Fuse, Charge, Hidden Run, or Move Through Cover for your unit, which is awesome. I mean, why not? Hidden Run is an awesome ability. Move Through Cover is awesome for jet bikes if you want to hug cover. And each turn. It's not a must, not a switch. You can do whatever you want each turn. Then 6s cause instant death. For some reason there's a Crown Warlord trait here. I have no idea why. There it is. Fearless Bubble within 7 inches. Not bad, because I already told you fear. Your guys are not fearless at all unless you take the big formation, and this is basically a smaller version of that, or of the Eldritch Keeper of Secrets, which names I forgot. And then the last one is Soulburst actions also within 14, just like the formations benefit, which is pretty nice, because that means you don't have to be too close to each other, which is always a problem if you're thinking about blast templates and so on. So if you're further from the action away, you still gain your Soulburst. Nice. Good Warlord traits. And as you can see, that is 5 Warlord traits, of which I consider 4 pretty nice, and the other 2, it will not die, and 6s cause instant death, not necessarily bad. I know a certain big monstrous creature that would like to have 6s on instant death, because it doesn't have instant death. So that's good. Also remember, the Visarch gets an extra Warlord trait, and each of these here on him sound pretty juicy. Artifacts. Only 2 here that are worth mentioning. The rest is just bad, because remember, these things take away one of your slots, and you don't want that little pistol that does maybe something once per game for 10 points that clogs up one of your artifact slots. No. The Lost Shroud is an option for 35 points, gives you Eternal Warrior if you know pain. It will not die, but you lose independent character. It can be good on a Sia, for example, if she goes solo, and she's gonna make a good Disruption Yncarne effects because you can't leave her alone, but she doesn't die as quickly, and so on. So basically a good idea in case you want to do some solo action. And then the Mirror Gaze, which is a little bit debatable. For 30 points, it's pretty expensive. Gains counterattack, night vision, which is like random as hell, but also blind. And now here comes the tricky part. I'm not sure if blind applies only to close combat attacks, like Shred, for example. Shred was clarified in FAQ that it only applies to close combat attacks, not to your shooting or psychic or whatever. Blind, the rules say, or if the guy has blind and is causing damage, the target has to take the initiative test, aka the blind test. Still can be argued, but that it's his weapons or his psychic powers that cause the damage, and if he's in close combat and he is hitting them with his bare fists or with his sword, then applies blind. I don't know if the blind would apply to psychic powers as well. That would be awesome. I mean, psychic shriek with blind sounds pretty good. Night vision is okay. Counterattack usable at least. So can be made work, but if blind doesn't only work on close combat attacks, probably not worth 30 points in an artifact slot. As you can see, that is all. The rest is pretty much meh or too expensive. The Revenant Discipline. There is a bunch of weird powers here and very good powers. I think very underestimated by most opponents, I'd say. The Primaris is an 18-inch range, strength 6 if you have higher leadership, otherwise 3 with no armor and no cover shot. And it's 1. And I'm like, why? I have no idea why you would cast that. It doesn't work against vehicles at all. And basically you're picking off one model, maybe. Just maybe. Maybe good against picking a Terminator or something. I don't know. Not really that good. Shield of Ynnead, 6+ in one save within 7 inches of the Psyker. Can stank with Sanctuary for a 5+ in one save on all models around. Other than that, not so good. Can only be useful if you could create a Death Star, but Eldar cannot create Death Stars that don't have in one saves already, because they're Harlequins most of the time. And everything else has higher in one saves than this, and it does not stack. So it's just a plain 6+. Not so good. Storm of Whispers. Now this one is a one that pisses me off because I'm a Grey Knight player, and it's basically this power that I have with one Warp Charge less, because it's Warp Charge 1. It's still a Nova, it's still ignoring cover, it's still 2d6, but it has AP2. So yeah, that is a very, very good power to have. You guys are mobile, you guys have Soul Burst, and this is gonna make some guys explode for sure. It also causes pinning, and remember this little guy that says use your lowest leadership. That is gonna be pretty nice if you cause pinning tests around you in an AoE, by the way. So very good one. Ward of the Phoenix, 1 warp charge, 1 unit within 9 inches gains a soul burst action. Awesome. Obviously. Like, gain 1 more action in your psychic phase. What? Not bad. Ancestor's Grace, warp charge 2, 14 range, +1 weapon skill, ability skill, initiative, attacks, leadership, and adamantium will on a unit. Okay, nice. First thing I'm thinking about here, just like with the 6+ in one save, the only thing that the Eldar have apart from Harlequin and Warlord Conclaves is Chimeras. So Dark Eldar units. Dark Eldar units can make big blobs. Dark Eldar units like more weapon skill, like more initiatives, like more attacks, like leadership, because they're running away very quickly. This can be used for those. So raise up flock, raise up flock, all that stuff. That's how you use it. Unblind Souls. Watch out 2. 12-inch range, strength 4. AP dash, model amount hits, and if any are slain, free soul burst action. Now that one here is great against any big squads. Hormagaunts, Orcs, Green Tide, the Inquisition formation, Wolfstar, I don't know what. Tell me what, and it's good against that. Because it's basically strength 4 hits on all models. On Psychers that have very good ballistic skill and everything. It doesn't have any AP, I mean, but these huge unit blobs mostly don't have any armor either. And if any are killed, like just one model, you gain a free soul burst action on top. So basically, Word of the Phoenix bound to a mass strength 4 attack. Gaze of Unit is weird. Watch Out 3 is extremely expensive in levels of D-Shot when you're considering Zinj magic. And it is very similar because it has strength 10, AP1, ignores cover, no saves, not even in one saves. But it's a Witchfire power, so it doesn't work against ICs very well. It can work against vehicles, but it's Watch Out 3. So that is really, really expensive to get off. And there's 10,000 powers better in the Eldar book, in the Harlequin book, and in this book than that. So I don't know. Very, very bad power in terms of cost efficiency. Not in its ability, but in its cost efficiency. So unless you really, really, really want something dead, I would probably not take it. Or not use it. Because you can't choose right, except when you have the Warlord Trait. Alright, that's the Revenant Discipline. I'd say there is 1, 2, 3, 4 very, very good ones. The premise is bad. The other one only in combination usable. And the next one I would never cast. And then finally the Reborn Warhost Detachment. So we have combined arms size. We're not talking about Castellans of the Imperium, although it's very, very similar in that sense that you choose from all these catalogs. But it is combined arms size, so 1 HQ, 2 troops, and then up to 3 in each. And any number of formations you like. Interestingly enough, all the formations in this book, a bunch of from the Dark Elder, not including Homunculus Covenants though, so no Talos spam or anything, and also the Eldar formations, or most of them, like the Warhost and so on. You gain Stubborn, not bad, and no moral checks for losing 25% when within 7 inches of another unit. That one is good, because if you shoot those Wind Riders and they lose one guy and they go off the table, you will be very, very sad, and one unit within 7 inches of another one, easy peasy. And they're not running away anymore. Stubborn makes them at least stay very long in close combat, and in any other case, you basically don't take checks very often. So semi-fearless. Then the other thing is at 7 units, which is super easy if you consider all the formations and the cheap units you have, so not like the Castellans, not at all, you gain an additional soul burst action for another unit every time you use one. That is huge. And do you guys remember that nice formation that has that effect within 14? Now we have 2 guys with that action within 14. And do you guys remember the formation that allows us to gain the soul burst effect on 4 instead of 1? And remember, we can take those formations twice. So now we have 8 so far soul burst actions on death within 7 inches. So that is big. That is really, really big. That's a good synergistic effect. And that is a detachment wind bonus too. So as you can see, the soul burst actions begin to get more power and get combinations that your enemy will not like, because they will occur whenever something dies. Doesn't matter if it's you or him. There will be something happening, and that will make him think about doing something twice. And if there's heavy shooting in your army, he will make sure that nothing is in range before he kills anything in that unit, because that will mean the D-Scythe is gonna destroy the next unit. And that D-Scythe came in from Deep Strike Reserve, by the way. Non-scattering because of Dark Eldar. So you have to be very, very careful what you do. If you shoot that transport, they will shoot the next target. So very, very nice synergistic effects here, and obviously this will multiply that effect. By the way, in terms of Castellans have horrible, horrible detachment rule. Most of these rules here are usable and good and achievable. So there you go. Eldar cheese right there. Imperium doesn't have stuff like this. And then the last one, the best one, because I'm a fan of this. I'm a Granite player, I already told you, and there's one thing that I love the Eldar for, which is the Herald of Victory. It's on one of their little flying units that you can take. Basically allows you to deep strike without scattering, and I thought it was awesome. I mean, if Greyhounds could do that, awesome. I could jump behind bank armor, I could place my flamer right in your face, and guess what? The Eldar get something that can do so. Now, first of all of these units here are black something. So black Guardians, black Guardian Wind Raiders, Bible Squads, War Walkers, and they are all a little bit more expensive, but instead they gain Webway Assault. So they deep strike from reserve and no scatter, but not within 9 inches of enemy models at all. Not with one model, not placing the model, then placing them closer. You have to stay away from them more than that, but you arrive precisely wherever you want, no matter what. These things still have battle focus, by the way. This is not part of the other detachment. You can choose them as you want. And you can take 1, but if you take 4, you also gain the ability to roll your reserve rolls turn 1. And remember that little autark I was talking about that is included in your army? he will make that a 2+ from reserves wherever you want to on the table with battle focus arriving. And now mind you something. Vipers have one issue. They have this 12-inch shuriken catapult that you can never use. Guess what? You're now landing with the 9 inches of a target, probably in its rear armor, and you're gonna fire that gun. And you will also choose the angle of where you come from, so if something is in cover or behind cover, it's dead. If it's in area terrain, well, you're gonna force a lot of saves. But if it's not in terrain, it's dead. Very simple. You have Blade Storm, you have high strength shooting if you want to. War Walkers are massively strong in terms of damage output. Only overshadowed by the bikes at some points, but they have some other selling points like armor values, which can help a lot against the arms fire. And they all have battle focus. So if you want a deep strike, if you want precision tools, if you want safety, that's all things that I like, by the way, this is your detachment. They also gain preferred enemies and stubborn on the entire detachment if anything chaos related is there. So if you're fighting against that sorcerer occult in the back, if you're fighting against that demon core that is trying to summon stuff and has some treacherous or renegades or something, this is your extra bonus. Preferred enemy is obviously awesome because you have high strength shooting, and high strength shooting works very well with preferred enemy. Rewarding ones to hit and wound is always useful. Now, in my opinion, one of the best detachments ever made, simply because it is simple. If you know what you're doing and if you consider all options, you always will realize, even same in the Tau Codex, the closer the range is, the cheaper the weapon options get that deal the most damage. So the scatter laser has 48 range, it has decent strength, it has 4 shots, but it doesn't have any AP. So if you come in closer, that's where the star cannons come into play, that's where the shuriken cannons come into play, the shuriken catapults come into play, that's where the Eldar can get nasty amounts of firepower. And that's not really where they want to be, but if they get a guaranteed first strike on the target they choose, with the unit they choose, with the weapons they choose, and with battle focus, so the ability to whoop away after shooting with almost any unit you have, or sword moving for some cases, that is pretty nasty. That is something I would consider not liking when I'm playing against it. And it's also an option, you don't have to roll. So that is pretty nasty in combination with all of what I told you here already. Alright, and that is it. That is the entire content. Now it doesn't sound like much, but I'll show you another video, so stay tuned for that. Also subscribe if you like the content, by the way. I will do another one on purely how to use the sort of thing, because there is like so much mind games, so much combinations, so much stuff that you have to be aware of when you're fighting against them. And I'll make sure I'll try it out. I think there is like alone the Ulthwe stuff will make me do an entire Eldar list new and see how it works. Then there's this big formation detachment that includes all this stuff and adds also the faction, so makes Wraithguard way better all of a sudden, makes Incubi usable and all that stuff. I don't know, that's something I feel is worth experimenting with and makes much more fun than the Imperial stuff, since the Imperial stuff only has one boon, that is the fact that they get OBSEC in the entire detachment due to Coteas, and that's a one trick. Basically, you're only spraying objective spam, and everything else you could already do, because you already could take multiple cards, and the benefit they have in the detachment is laughable. For the amount of units you have to take, you're going apocalyptic size. This detachment, not so much. This detachment is very easy to fill. It's very low on restrictions and does not require you to take much stuff. Everything that has attacks in here is basically filled with stuff that is really good, like the multiple soul burst actions and all that stuff. That is really, really powerful, regardless if you're taking witches or not. They will do major work if they just die, because everything else is gonna get a free action and it's gonna apply those and basically make break the day of your opponent, depending how good you play. So this is one of the things that I really like. There is counterplay here because your opponent can choose where to trigger this stuff. There is your own play here because you can put him into a position where he doesn't want to kill your units, and all that real tactical choices that you have. Now you might say this is another thing to make Eldar more broken again, and I agree. But it's also buff to Dark Elder and Harlequin, which I like. And it's also buff to Close Combat, which I even more like. And we will see if this kind of stuff will increase the amount of builds you will see with Eldar. Because I'm sick and tired of seeing Scatter Laser spam and a Wraith in Construct in every single game. And I think variety is always a good thing no matter what. Eldar were already strong before. I don't think this makes much of a difference at the end of the day, but it will certainly make for some really cool builds and for some interesting variety that I like. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If so, leave a like, leave a comment if you have questions, if I made rule errors, if you know a combo that would be really cool to run. And obviously this is targeting Eldar, Dark Eldar and Harlequin players, and I cannot say I'm an expert of any of those armies, so if I missed something, leave a comment there. And other than that, happy wargaming and